Good morning, everybody. First, I want to thank the organizers to invite me to this conference. And there is something very strange in this conference that you are all researchers of water, but 97% of the water in on the Earth, is seawater, really. So maybe we have to focus a little bit more in this seawater, no? Some very simple things first to know that we are water, no? The body is, as Gerard Pollack said yesterday, is 2/3 of water. But during many times, this water in the body wasn't considered very important for medicine. But today, when you read the Canon, for example, the Canon is a book the student of medicine use in Europe to study medical physiology. You can read that in the chapter 1 that the cell that conforms the body of the multicellular animals, aquatic or terrestrial, exist in an internal sea called the extracellular fluid. So this internal fluid is exactly the same than the primordial ocean where life appeared. There is many researchers today that they are saying that our internal liquid, our internal water, is seawater. Manuel Garcia Velarde, for example, in Madrid, from the University of Madrid, say that 80% of the water in the brain is seawater. So if we are seawater, we can demonstrate that the life appears in seawater too, with the works of Greg Venter. You remember, he's a man who makes the decodification of the human genome. And he made a fantastic expedition. It was an ocean sampling expedition. He harvests seawater in different points of the globe, and he filtered this seawater and find more than 6 million of new genes and thousands of new protein families. That means, really, that seawater still produces life today. So this was the hypothesis of René Quinton. Seawater is the origin of the life. Who was René Quinton? René Quinton was a French Renaissance man, really. He did a lot of things, and very well. He was a war hero. He started the First World War as soldier and finished as colonel. Only having good actions during the war, no? He was a writer and philosopher. He was an aviation predecessor. This is very important because René Quinton was a man who designed the wings of the first planes. The granddaughter of René Quinton still has letters from the Wright brothers asking René Quinton how they have to design these wings. And of course, René Quinton was biologist and physiologist. This is René Quinton on the right in Paris, at the Bourget. When René Quinton died in 1925, he was very famous in France. He had funeral states. He had a statue in his hometown in Chambéry. It's a little town very close to Paris. It's 44 kilometers far to Paris. A lot of personalities came to his funeral. Writers, actors, ambassadors from other countries, generals, thousands of mothers with young children on arms, saved by René Quinton. The president of the French Republic at this time, Paul Painlevé, read the panegyric of René Quinton. So he was very famous. And why René Quinton was very famous at this time? He was compared to Louis Pasteur, to Charles Darwin. Why? Because he saved thousands and thousands of people in France at this time. The most important here is to read the title of the newspaper. This is a newspaper from the beginning of the 20th century, and he compares René Quinton to Louis Pasteur, and he said that the works of Pasteur gave us a conception of the disease, but the works of René Quinton give us a conception of health. So seawater is going to help us to to give all the elements to the patient to improve himself, his health. René Quinton wrote a fantastic book called L'eau de mer, milieu organique, is seawater organic medium. It is a book where he demonstrates the identity between the organic water and isotonic seawater. And in the last pages, he explained how is the protocol of René Quinton. This is very important, and we will go back on this. There is a lot of followers of René Quinton at the beginning of the 20th century. A lot of doctors wrote their doctoral thesis about seawater. Here is one about drinkable seawater in dyspepsia, Professor Dr. Barrère. And René Quinton opened a lot of marine dispensary where they only practice the marine therapy with seawater. This is the first one, opened in Paris. Is very near the Gare Montparnasse. And in this marine dispensary, they use these two products. One is a plasma of Quinton, and the other one is Duplas of Quinton. The first one is isotonic seawater, and the second one is hypertonic seawater. So René Quinton used only this seawater to treat a lot of people. We will go in to see which kind of disease he'll treat. This is René Quinton at the marine dispensary. And as I told you, there is a complete generation of babies saved by René Quinton. And this generation was called in France Quinton babies. Jean Jaricot the Dr. Jean Jaricot was a follower of René Quinton. He was the director of the marine dispensary of Lyon in the south of France. He wrote a fantastic book called The Marine Dispensary. It's 600 of pages of treatments like this one. So it's babies coming to the marine dispensary totally dehydrated. The reason of the dehydration change a lot. Some are only malnutrition, others are infantile cholera, others come from atrepsia. So there is many kinds of problems. So these children came into the marine dispensary, and they use only isotonic seawater, some injection of isotonic seawater, and they can reestablish the babies quickly. In only a few days, they can start to eat normally, to drink normally, and they gain the weight quickly. René Quinton see quickly that he can improve skin problems too. This is impetiginous eczema, another one in the leg, in arms, hands and arms, lichenoid eczema in neck. So it started to improve a lot of people with dermatologic problems, psoriasis. There were a doctor in France in the 60s who demonstrated that with Quinton isotonic seawater, you can have 28% of good results in psoriasis. We know that psoriasis is very complicated. There is other factors involved in psoriasis, but you can see the improvement are amazing. So here we have a testimonial from Malaysia. This is only with drinking isotonic seawater, and we can see before and after using isotonic seawater. So the most important thing really is not how to use the seawater, is where we are going to harvest the seawater. Is the original protocol of René Quinton. There is something very important that in the food chain, only the plants are able to change the minerals from inorganic form to organic form for the rest of the food chain. And today it's very difficult through our food, our diet, to find all the minerals in the plants. The plants may look the same, but they now have far fewer minerals. So it's very difficult to obtain all these minerals from our diet. They still have a food chain more safe, is a food chain from the ocean. So you have the phytoplankton here. The phytoplankton can change all these minerals from inorganic form to from inorganic to organic form for the rest of the food chain. And now we know that it's very difficult eating fish to obtain these minerals because the fish we are going to eat come from PC factories. So it's very difficult to obtain these minerals. But if we stay in this step of the food chain, the phytoplankton and the zooplankton, we are going to see the transformation of these minerals. This was the work of Maurice Aubert. Maurice Aubert was the president of the University of the Sea in France, in Nice. He works more than 40 years trying to explain this changing. How can we change the inorganic form from the minerals in the sea to the organic form? He said that they are biological facts, but very difficult to explain. And here we can see from the BBC, from the Blue Planet, it was a documentary very impressive. We can see the first step of this biosynosis. The biosynosis is exactly the way to transform these minerals from inorganic to organic form. Here you have zooplankton. Zooplankton is a little animal, is less than 1 millimeters, and is going to hit the phytoplankton. And the phytoplankton is, I don't know if you can see the just small points. Okay, we cannot see very well on the screen, but he's hitting this phytoplankton, and later he's going to excrete this phytoplankton, and you can see here the liquid, a different liquid of density of liquid in the ocean. So this is the ocean, and this is the liquid from the zooplankton. So this is full of minerals totally bioavailable for the rest of the food chains. So we have to harvest the seawater just under these points. These points are called a bloom. A bloom is a concentration of phytoplankton. And in this bloom, we can see a vortex. The vortex is just, all this is phytoplankton. This is a picture from the European Agency of Aerospatial European Agency. You can see here the coast of Maine, and you can see the vortex here. All this is phytoplankton. There is many places in the world with this kind of picture. This is a Bering Stretch. You can see the vortex here. This is the same. This is Japan. You can see the vortex here. All that is phytoplankton, of course. This is a British Channel. We can see the phytoplankton bloom here. You can see here this concentration of phytoplankton is bigger than 700 kilometers. So it's like a forest, really. The real length of the Earth is the ocean. And here you have it here in the Gulf of Vizcaya, we can see this phytoplankton. This is the point, the original point of the Quinton lab. This picture was taken in 2008. You can see the phytoplankton here, and this one in 2014. So in the same point, you have always the same concentration of phytoplankton. That corresponds to the fish ground, really. So we can see here the different three vortex. So it's important to harvest in these points. As Dr. Marc Henry is professor of physics quantic in the University of Strasbourg. He said that all these points are domain of covariance. So all the minerals at these points can have the same properties. If you have as a seawater in another point, maybe you can not have the same properties. So we have to have just under the phytoplankton. This is a phytoplankton, so harvesting the seawater here. Normally it's between 30 meters depth. You obtain this quality of seawater. Of course, today there is a lot of contamination in the oceans. We need to be very carefully with everything. And to be more safe, you have to produce all analyses necessary to avoid any contamination. So we do endotoxin, heavy metals, of course, simple analysis of microbiological, and since the accident in Fukushima, we are making radioactivities analysis too. So now we have the pure seawater. We know how to harvesting this pure seawater, and now how to make this seawater totally safe for the consumption. You have to sterilize this seawater, but it's very important that the seawater cannot be heating, because when you heat the seawater, you produce, as Chernikov and Bruskov demonstrate, a quantity of free radicals, hydroxyl free radicals, and these free radicals in contact with the different mucus are going to dehydrate instead to hydrate the body. There is another reason you don't have to heat the seawater. It's because the seawater contains carbon organic total. Normally it's around 3.24 milligrams per liter. And this organic, carbon organic, is vitamin, amino acids. We demonstrate that this organic matter has a therapeutical effect. It's published in Biochemical and Biophysical Research Communication, and he demonstrates that this organic matter inhibits the arteriosclerosis progression. This is a drop of seawater enlarged 20 times, so it's very important that when you drink seawater, you don't have to drink all this, of course. You have to filter the seawater using Coll microfiltration. This is the filters we are using, 0.22 micras, to be sure that there is nothing in the seawater. So, as I told you, there is two kinds of product. There is hypertonic seawater and isotonic seawater. So to produce isotonic seawater, you have to reduce the quantity of salt, and to do it, there is only two ways. One is to do electrolysis, but if you do the electrolysis, you are going to heat the seawater, so we cannot do it. And the other way is to mix with spring water. So the choice of the spring water was very important. At the beginning, René Quinton tried to use distilled water, but distilled water is heating seawater too, so we cannot use it. And he found in France spring water with some special conditions, with a pH around 6 and a dry residue less than 25 milligrams per liter. Today, we are using Aguas de Fondetal in Badajoz in Spain, because they are very similar to the spring water René Quinton used in France. So now we have Quinton hypertonic, isotonic seawater, hypertonic seawater, and when we see the consequence of a mineral imbalance, as Dr. Linus Pauling said, all the disease can be explained by an imbalance of minerals, of vitamins. Dwayne Ashmed added that if there are no vitamins, the body more or less can use the trace elements, but the deficiency of minerals inactivates the vitamins. So in 1 ampule of seawater, you can find these 78 minerals, only in 1 ampule. So the minerals, they are not in in 1 ampule of Quinton, of seawater, is because they are artificial or they are only a few grams on Earth. We start to work with Professor Jose Miguel Sempere. He's the professor of immunology area at the University of Alicante. And we try to demonstrate how the seawater works really in our body. And the first things we done was to see the effect, the immunomodulatory activity of the seawater in humans' white cells. So this is very important because we put different white cells in 3 kind of saline solution. This is a normal saline solution. This is RPMI. RPMI is the most famous cell mediator growth, and isotonic seawater. As you can see here, the white cells, the little black points we have, there is no reaction. Here in the RPMI, we can see the aggregates of the white cells. So there is a small reaction in contact with the RPMI. And in isotonic seawater, you can see big aggregates of the white cells. That's very strange because it's an activation of the immune system of the white cells. We do the same with red cells. With red cell, we put red cells and we measure the survival time of this red cell. And we see that with the green line is a saline solution, they start to die at, after 48 hours. With the RPMI, they start to die after 72 hours. But look at with isotonic seawater, the line is flat. They can survive more than 100 hours. And in fact, the experiment was done, and we see that they can survive more than 150 hours. We continue with Professor Jose Miguel Sempere. He demonstrates not only this reaction of the white cells, but he demonstrates that the seawater can activate 5 different markers of immunological markers. And the seawater can modulate perfectly these 5 immunological markers. So one of the markers was the molecule of adhesion. The molecule of adhesion are these small molecules that allow the white cell to go outside the vessel of the blood. So if you have more molecule of adhesion molecules, you can go faster to the focus of infection. So this is the 5 markers really we demonstrate we can modulate very well with isotonic seawater. One is this molecule of adhesion, white cells, interleukin-2, TNF-alpha, and interferon gamma. The interferon gamma is very important because the interferon gamma is going to activate interferon alpha and beta to control the size of the tumors. And Jose Miguel published in the Congress of Immunology in Vienna in 2015, the last work paper, is talking about modulation of the immune system again with the isotonic seawater. And we can see really that there is a synergistic effect of isotonic seawater in the lymphocytary proliferation. Isotonic seawater seems to compensate RPMI nutrients reduction with greater communication between cells. At lower pHa stimulation, we observed a greater difference between difference in proliferation between isotonic seawater and PBS. And there seems to be a threshold quantity. That means the most important in the seawater is not the quantity of minerals, it's the quality of these minerals, the bioavailability of these minerals. It's a reason we can have this kind of testimonial from, here is from Malaysia. Many different diseases can be treated with isotonic seawater. Here we have a various infection, And only a few ampoules of isotonic seawater rehabilitates the man in only 3 days. We can see the same eczema I show you in the old pictures, but in recent pictures, always from Malaysia. Eczema in children, in adults, muscle atrophy, inflammation in eyes. Just cleaning the eyes and drinking isotonic seawater, you can restore this. This is, we have, just to check a little bit this picture. This is a young boy, he's only 11 years old. As you can see, he has a lot of wounds on the skin. And in fact, he's a mercury toxicity. You know that in Malaysia, they eat a lot of fish, and the fish come from the Strait of Malacca. The Strait of Malacca is the worst water you can find in the world, I think. And so they eat this kind of fish, a lot of mercury, of course, and this is the result of the disease they have. And we can see that only 1 ampoule of isotonic seawater per day during 20 days is the difference between the two pictures. So there is really a very incredible improvement when you try to clean your body from heavy metals. This is the works of Chris Shade. Chris Shade is in United States, in Colorado. He's the most important person working on detoxicity of metal detoxification. And he used always isotonic seawater to try to put outside the cell the mercury. There is another paper, very interesting, published in the General de Gerontologia in Italy by Dr. Roberto Lacava, is how to use isotonic seawater in elderly people with dementia. So we show that we can improve the general condition of these people only using isotonic seawater. And the latest paper we submitted recently, it was how drinking seawater while involved with resistance training program can improve kidney health and cardiovascular health and isometric strength. So this was made by Professor Juan Carlos Collado from the University of Valencia. So how to use Quinton hypertonic seawater in sport to improve the resistance training. So at least the last slide is about a publication we made with Dr. Alexander Koklov from the University of Moscow about the potential geroprotector Quinton marine plasma in experiments on cultured cell. It's very interesting to demonstrate that the perfect liquid to maintain and to create life is really isotonic seawater. Just you can find in this publication, this paper, in Current Hygiene Science, all the resume of this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this nice presentation. A few questions before the break. Yes, over here.
What have been your findings regarding the contamination of water around Fukushima? We know that there has been a serious problem with the plankton, and also the effects of being monitored also off of Korea and the neighboring countries.
In all Asian area, there are a lot of problems of contamination. Not only Fukushima, there are the contamination from the Yellow River from China too, carrying a lot of heavy metals. It's very difficult to find an area in this region with a good seawater. But the fact is, we are harvesting the seawater in Gulf of Vizcaya in Spain, and we know that the seawater of the Atlantic is going to be renewed with Pacific seawater every 1,000 years. So we have time to wait that the Atlantic seawater will be contaminated with Fukushima accident, okay? Of course, there is in Atlantic Sea, I don't know if you remember, in the 60s, they start to drop the containers with radioactivity dust in the Atlantic abyss. And we know that there were a German channel who filmed the containers, and the containers were totally open, and the plutonium in contact with the seawater, but there were no radioactivity. So a reaction, 30,000 years reaction, will be done in only 60 years. So it's something very strange. Nobody knows what's happened really, but there is no more contamination of radioactivity in these points.
Last question over here.
How you try to identify the components or the combination of components that that has the curative effects?
In one ampoule of seawater, you can find the minerals. The minerals is analysis made at the University of Alicante by the chemical department. They use ECPM and ECP-OAS to demonstrate how many minerals there is in. And the amino acid and the vitamins, there is no way to do it. There is some papers talking about the presence of vitamin B. It's a family of the vitamin B in the oceans, but there is no analysis techniques to do it. So we don't know exactly the different compounds.
Thank you once again.
Thank you.